Good morning, class. So I'm going to go out and on a limb and say most of you have probably never heard of a man named William Levitt. I hadn't heard of him until this week when I was looking around for a post-war entrepreneur to use for this assignment. And what I discovered is a man who may have had more of an impact on life in America than almost anyone, with a few rare exceptions, like maybe Franklin Roosevelt, Bill Gates, or Sam Walton. So William Levitt is important because he single-handedly created the American subdivision and is known as the father of the suburbs. William Levitt was born in 1907. He was the son of a real estate developer in New York and the co-owner of Levitt and Sons Real Estate. So Levitt and Sons was founded by William's father Abraham, and before World War II concentrated primarily on building high-end housing in Long Island. But during the war, William served with the Navy Seabees, where he learned techniques for mass-producing buildings. And, so being already familiar with the home construction process, he was sure that he could find a way to capitalize on this knowledge. With the war wrapping up, he knew that nearly 1 million servicemen were going to be returning home, where they would find new jobs and be ready to buy homes and settle down. So after conferring with his father and brother, Levitt and Sons laid the plans for the first ever mass-produced community neighborhood, which would be located in Long Island and known as Levittown. This first process was put together on the fly and resulted initially in the production of 4,000 homes, soon to be followed by another 4,000. And as this community grew, the Levitts added schools and post offices, furthering the idea of the pre-planned community, because they had these thousands and thousands of homes all packed together in these huge neighborhoods. So they realized they were going to have to put some of these amenities in there. And I think it was out of necessity and also out of, Levitt, this idea of the pre-planned neighborhood was just fascinating to Mr. Levitt. One of the primary draws for these communities was that they were cheap, roughly $8,000 at the time. There was either a low or a no down payment to move in with easy financing. And best of all, they capitalized on the new VA loan that the government had instituted. And they allowed young middle-class families to realize the American dream. So after the Levittown, New York was built, they started developing plans for a second neighborhood. And this would be their crowning achievement, essentially. The second neighborhood would be built in Pennsylvania, located just north of Bucks County, or in Bucks County, just north of Philadelphia, and it too would be called Levittown. It eventually consisted of 17,000 houses, all built over a period of only 6 years. At that time, when at the height of their production, they were completing 200 houses per day, using a reverse assembly line where materials were dropped off on a lot, and 27 different crews, all trained to complete a specific part of the house, would rotate in a specified order. This newest Levittown would be meticulously planned and was the prototype of the modern subdivision, very much like what millions of Americans live in now. The population of Levittown, Pennsylvania, eventually reached over 70,000 people and was the 10th largest city in Pennsylvania. It was also essentially the first HOA. Houses were roughly the same size, about 750 to 800 square feet, and they were different enough to avoid total uniformity. So there was, one would be painted a little different, one would have different siding, maybe one would have windows in different places. So back to the HOA concept, you couldn't change the color of your house, you couldn't build fences. The houses were all landscaped. Getting back to the pre-planned community, they had their own, Levitt built schools, he built post offices, parks, baseball fields, swimming pools, all designed for use by the community residents and all designed to help form a community. They were designed to meet the needs of growing children. No children on his way to school, no child on his or her way to school would ever have to cross a major roadway or walk more than a half of a mile. He built 16 churches. Each church was donated to the specific denomination that would inhabit, that particular church. Shopping centers. There were two 55-acre shopping centers also within walking distance of pretty much any location in town. So Levittown, PA was a major success, but it wasn't without its detractors. Historian and sociologist Lewis Mumford called Levittown a low-grade, uniform environment from which escape was impossible. And the folk singer Pete Seeger referred to Levitt houses as little boxes on the hillside. However, the most significant controversy associated with Levittown was its whites-only policy. Part of the purchase agreement for anyone hoping to live in Levittown was that only people of the Caucasian race could live in a Levittown house, and residents were only allowed to sell to other Caucasians. Levitt himself, a Jew, claimed that this policy did not reflect his personal beliefs, but that it was a business decision. He asserted that if he were to allow black people into neighborhoods, he would not be able to sell to whites. So the federal government eventually stepped in at the request of the NAACP and declared the practice unconstitutional. However, selling to white people remained a de facto policy well into the 1960s. Levitt would eventually build over 140,000 houses before selling Levitt & Sons for about $92 million in 1967. Mr. Levitt's fortunes would change in his old age when he was sued for misappropriation of funds and ended up losing most of what he had. He ended up dying in 1994, but his legacy is pretty impactful. And I don't think anybody really realizes how the modern suburb came to be. I know I didn't. And so this was pretty informative research. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope everybody has a good week. Thanks.